Now we're going to start our first session of the day, which is Concepts, Methods, and Strategies for CCIs. Leandro is going to be chairing it. We're also going to have Mafalda Damaso. She's professor at the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies of the European University Institute. Dave O'Brien is professor of Cultural and Creative Industries at the University of Manchester. Jonathan is also in this one. Sorry, Jonathan. I told you to go, but you should come back. He's professor of innovation and entrepreneurship at Newcastle University Business School. And Kate Oakley is professor of culture and creative arts at the School of Cultural and Creative Arts at the University of Glasgow. Let me just hand over all the microphones to you guys.
Yeah. Microphone. Yeah. So, good morning again. Jonathan is here again. Lovely to see you again. But this is we thought this first session as somehow an academic perspective, but also I will, let's say, try to stimulate a conversation on two main things. The first one is why you personally decided to research and work in creative and cultural industries. Yeah, this is an unexpected part. And also, if you can, I will stimulate also this conversation. What are the methods? What are the protocols, the research protocols you've been using to research creative and cultural industries? Why do you think that this is relevant? And what kind of findings you would like to share with our group today? Sounds good like this. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the panel and part of the day. And sorry I missed you all yesterday. So why the existential question, which I wasn't expecting. I mean, I have, I guess, a kind of job interview answer to that, which is about the way the field provides me with lots of interesting questions that I'm keen to answer. It allows me to kind of link up things that I'm interested in cultural and media studies, in sociology, in some bits of economics, in some bits of history, in bits of political science. But I think it's also worth kind of stressing the slightly accidental nature. Culture and creative industries as a field, we might talk about as being maybe 20 years old, like maybe 30. I got my first job as a lecturer in cultural and creative industries in 2012 at City University, London. You might remember that, Kate. And I think that may be the first lectureship at City that was CCI in that sense. So there's also, I guess, the kind of developing nature of a field that has both provided me with opportunities, but has also slightly kind of haphazardly emerged and developed. Do you want me to do the second one, or give...
Maybe we can.
Yeah.
So that's the issue in having a very friendly session. So I feel confident to break the script like this. Sorry, guys, but that's great. Just because we are almost all in the same age group. So yeah, we didn't have like creative and cultural industries as a field. Let's say I'm going to study creative and cultural industries, as some of you guys are doing now. So that I feel like this is I hope this is an interesting reflection. Mafalda, you want to share with us?
Okay. So I also have a kind of job career answer, which is that, so I do European Union. I focus on the European Union and on its cultural policies, audiovisual policies, and the ways that the European Union supports culture around the world. And the answer to that is that I know that the field is very underdeveloped and that the culture can play a much more important role, and I want to contribute to that. The personal and real answer is that I tried several other things and I was very bored. And I thought that life was too short to be bored all the time. And I also felt that I belonged. I always felt like an outsider, and I love being among outsiders and among people who reject boxes and categories. And so I feel like I'm part of that community. And that connects to the issue on creative industries. I reject as much as possible the term creative industries. I hate it. I think it's unhelpful. I think it's short-sighted. I think that it limits discussions around culture and its importance. It skews the limitation, the conversation, but not using it also has consequences. And so, to give you an example, for several years now, I worked on a project around the European film industry. That was the official title because this was an European project. And there are loads of publications that are coming up. If you follow me, you're going to see like books and special issues and this and that. We've been working on it for several years. I'm not a machine in 2026. But, and you will see that one of the things that we say in that project is that the idea of European film competitiveness and the idea that film supports growth is extremely limited. And that, for example, looking at the work that I did, the value of European film and of the sector is namely geopolitical. That is, when we speak to people in Brazil or South Korea or Mexico, or in my case, South Africa, and we ask them, why do you want to work with the European film funding? And what's the value in doing that? They'll say, because it's collaborative. Whereas if we work with US, we're paid a fee and we lose intellectual property. And if we work with China, we have no artistic freedom. And so with Europe, it's just interesting. It's collaborative. And yes, it's very slow, it's complex, but it's really built on collaboration and on placing artistic experimentation at the center. And when I go then and speak to an EU, a politician or policymaker, they stop thinking. I'm starting to talk and they're thinking of something else. I mean, it just becomes too complex and complicated. It's just much easier to say, it's great, it supports growth, right? So, long answer to your question, I don't use creative industries, so I guess I'm the black swan here somehow. Not fully, all of us are in different ways. All of us are actually, now that I think of it. And also because I do think, and I think that this is guided by that understanding of the cultural sector as a space of outsiders. So I think that what I'm doing in policy tries to protect that space.
That's great. Katie, my cheek question deserves an answer.
Oh, yes, okay, fine. Yes, well, I'm definitely at the upper end of that shared kind of age group that we all have. And I was working, the reason I'm in this field is because I was working as a kind of jobbing policy consultant way back in 1997 when the Creative Industries Task Force was assembled and sat and came up with the idea, which was then colonially distributed around the world. So it was a kind of accidental thing. I fell into doing that kind of work at a moment when that kind of work exploded. So I did that kind of work as a jobbing consultant for several years. And then I went into academia partly to escape the nature of that you were exactly describing, of that kind of rather uncritical expansion of this kind of economic notion, which seemed to reduce cultural activity to quite kind of narrow things. And is highly problematic, is highly global north developed, it's enormously kind of problematic field. So I kind of went into academia to escape that. And within academia, I found that there were traditions of people, of course, who've been, I knew this anyway when I say I found, there are traditions of people who've been researching these things in many ways in media studies and cultural studies for decades and have interesting things to say about them in sociology, etc. And then I've always felt slightly, although I'm very happy that I was on the appointment panel for Dave for his first creative industries job, I've always felt slightly uncomfortable about the notion of creative industries as a kind of field. I don't think academically it makes any sense as a field, really. I don't think it's fed into. It's not constructed in the way that I think an academic field should be constructed. It's made up of other things, that's fine, it's interdisciplinary, but I do worry a little bit about it. I'm currently in a subject area which is called cultural industries, and it's not an accident. We fought to be called that, because we didn't want to be called kind of creative industries. So that's my kind of answer. I fell into it accidentally. It's been really, it's been great for 30 years kind of thing, but it is a highly problematic notion academically, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Kate. Jonathan.
Yeah, so in my case, so for 20 years I was a contract researcher, right? Before I became a university professor, I was working for research centres and depending on grants to pay my salary, and you tend to follow the money and try and develop a niche in an area, and I started around digital media, video games development, and broadened out to creative industries later on. What fascinates me about creative industries, I really love the term. I love it. What I love about it is that tension between creative people who are coming up with ideas and need autonomy and want to come up with original things, and the fact that they're under pressure and that they have to deliver to deadlines and they have to develop products that have to be, in the shops for Christmas. And I think that tension between, the business management aspects and the culture and creativity, I mean, that tension and the way it plays out, the balance, I think, is what fascinates me about it. And I love it, and I love that Mafalda and Kate are so irritated by it, because because that's exactly the sorts of tensions that I find so interesting about it. And the challenge is, how do you manage creativity in this? It's not the arts. You can't do absolutely everything, and I think it's that sort of containment in it, which I think is that fascinates me so much about it.
Thank you so much. Well, we have almost everything we need here now. We have the whole discussion on how to shape a field, and at least, Dave, we are trying to shape a field here in Manchester, so at least we have jobs. And also the very idea of being outsider in some social sciences or even economics in order to rethink new ways to understand the phenomena, and how we can see the development of several agencies in governments for creative and cultural industries, different programs of research, of training in creative and cultural industries. And we are sort of living the emergence of, if not a field, Kate, I think that also is really difficult to shape this as a field for the heterogeneities inside the industries. We have at least a momentum for creative and cultural industries. That's why it's so important, the approaches you guys work in academic perspective, which is really an important way to create meaning for the work and how to deliver some rationale, some knowledge, and how it can influence policy, how it can influence training, and even the shape of the fields. So, Dave, if you can now bring your research perspective, that's going to be great.
Yeah, I thought when I was doing the prep for this session, I was thinking about what to pick up on, and maybe I'll do two things. One is, and I mean, this sort of speaks to the kind of limits of creative industries. Across quite a lot of policy, certainly if we were looking at policy, say, 15, 20 years ago, all you had was growth, jobs. These things are great, and they can be used for a variety of different public policy purposes. I think one thing that myself and various other colleagues have been involved with is trying to say, what about inequalities? And some of this is bringing, say, sociological perspectives in. Some of it has been picking up on kind of cultural studies, media studies, traditions. Some of it has been thinking about the way economics gets applied or doesn't, and what particular traditions are used in that space. And what's been interesting, I think sometimes in the academic literature, there's an assumption that the academic literature kind of says, hang on, there's all these problems with the creative industries, exclusions around, say, class, race, gender, disability, this kind of thing. We can give you these life histories, these statistics, and policy doesn't pay attention. What's happened certainly in the last kind of decade is policy now in the UK, at European level, various other nations, takes the kinds of inequalities that academics have been writing about, pointing out really, really seriously, but they are incredibly ineffective at dealing with those problems. So the other thing that I've been kind of working on more recently is I'm kind of embedded with the UK government's Ministry of Culture, sort of 2.5 days a week. I'm a kind of civil servant for them, and I've been working with them to think about how can they be, I guess, better kind of commissioners for research, and how can academics be better kind of producers of research. Some of this has been very productive. We've been, thinking about kind of training programs, ways of communicating research needs. But, and just to give a little anecdote, last week I was helping out a policy team about a particular policy, worked through a document to be shared kind of between some Whitehall departments. And one of the kind of comments that came back was, yeah, have you not just got a killer stat we can use, just immediately, instead of all of this like pages and pages of evidence or whatever. So, there's still quite a lot of work to be done. There's still, I think, overlapping but perhaps parallel worlds of critical academic research and policy. But things are moving closer than they used to be, I'd say.
Thank you very much, Dave. Mafalda, you can speak in Portuguese from Portugal if you want.
No, I think
it's your choice.
Better, yeah.
We have translation from Portuguese to Portugal as well.
I never speak in Portuguese about my work, so I don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so desculpem, mas it would be too slow. Seria muito lenta. I'm really not used to speaking about my work in Portuguese. I would be looking for words. So yeah, I'm increasingly. So there's a lot of research that's coming up. So I'm going to talk about things that are not yet published, but I think that might interest you. So I grew up in Portugal, a country that has a very strong colonial past, and I think that's very important to say because, again, I think the biographical, it really explains, in my case at least, why I do what I do. And I spent many years, in my late 20s actually, learning about that history because we're not taught that history at school. And then in my 30s, I started working on cultural policy and the cultural policies of the European Union. And now I'm connecting the dots. So I'm trying to do work that still focuses on the European Union because I find it really interesting. I do think, as I said, that there's space for more ambitious policies. And at the same time, recognizing the colonial past of the European Union, but using that in a productive way. What do I mean by that? I'm trying to do work that looks at the way how the European Union supports and works with other countries around the world, but decentering my perspective so that it's not focused on the EU, but that it's actually focused on how non-Europeans perceive the EU. And so one paper that is coming up quite in, I think, the next few months, it looked at South African film professionals, and based on this project on the European film industry, and we had a lot of interviews and statements of these film professionals about the European Union and European film funding, etc. And I looked at scholarship that looks at claims of global justice. So when we look at global inequities, what kind of claims of justice? So what kind of arguments are made about global inequities? One, for example, is about knowledge, right? Our forms of knowledge are not taken seriously in the same way. Others are about institutions. Our institutions are closed, right? So I looked at those kind of claims of inequalities, and then I asked, what are these South African film professionals saying about the EU? The EU says that it tries to be equal and to support mutuality and collaboration. Are we walking the talk or not? And so what I did was I basically asked South Africans, or I asked the data, how fair are these cooperation programs from the point of view of those that are actually receiving the funding? And we were talking about it yesterday, and you said, oh, that's kind of obvious. And I think, yeah, it's quite obvious. But now that I got there, it's obvious. It took me 10 years to get here. But I hope that this is the kind of work that I'll be doing the next few years. I want to, yes, decenter Europe, and at the same time recognize its privilege in the world. And that's the kind of balance that I'll be trying to build in terms of cultural policy. Yeah.
Have you learned about the colonial past of Brazil?
The colonial past of Brazil? Well, yeah.
Just joking. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mafalda. Kate, Can you?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so having escaped kind of doing cultural creative industries boosterism as a consultant and escaped into academia, I suppose the things that I've been most associated with is work on cultural labour, really, and I do think in a way that a subfield of kind of what you might call critical cultural labour studies has developed really rapidly over the last kind of 20 years. I think a lot of the theoretical work was done about 20 years ago, and since then, we've had a lot more empirical work, but that's the nature of the field kind of thing. And I think that's been reasonably, as Dave was sort of hinting at, I think some of that work has been actually quite policy influential. I think it's managed to, the myth of the kind of independent, free, entrepreneurial kind of creative worker that was around at the sort of turn of the last century, I think has been pretty much punctured. Sometimes the critiques are overdone. I mean, these people are not working in coltan mining or anything, but nonetheless, some of the kind of inequalities, some of the labour exploitation, some of these questions have been surfaced by that, and I've been involved with that work for quite a long time, and I think it's built a reasonably successful kind of field with some policy heft. I worry a little bit, as Dave was sort of hinting at, that a lot of the questions of inequality in the cultural industries, and particularly in cultural industries production, have been rather depoliticized and turned into a kind of technocratic series of kind of, let's have some more guidelines and let's have some commentary on some guidelines and let's hire some people to say how well the guidelines are working and all that kind of stuff. And I think it has been rather sort of depoliticized, so that's a problem. And the second area of work I suppose I've been involved with in the last decade has really been around this questions around, as we were touching on the end of the day yesterday, about sort of sustainable development, the environmental crisis, the role of culture in that. And the interesting thing about that was I sort of got into that by being the kind of arts person on a big ESRC, the UK funding council project, which is mostly composed of environmental economists and all kinds of other people, and they don't really buy or are not remotely interested in the idea of the creative industries. If they sort of heard of it, they don't really understand it. What they want you to tell them about is the arts. That's what they were kind of into. They want you to tell them about the arts, but they have, as people often do in these kind of things, an almost naive faith in the ability of the arts to save us from the ravages of kind of climate change. And I think we all understand that. We understand where it comes from and questions of meaning and belonging and all those kind of things. But then you also have to keep reminding them that, as we learned yesterday, 60% of the cultural sector in Brazil is tech. AI is going to destroy the planet, kind of thing. Let alone, so the idea that the arts are going to somehow save us is always sitting in this difficult conflict with the fact that it's enormously resource dependent in the current forms of production.
That's correct. Thank you so much, Kate. Jonathan?
Yeah, so I was thinking yesterday, it took me back to some of the old debates we had, and I come from innovation studies, it's my sort of home field. And so we used to talk there about, in terms of catching up in developing countries, there was this idea of leapfrogging, right? And the idea that you could miss out some of the harder stages of industrialization and leap to new technologies. You don't need to go through stages of laying all the infrastructure necessary for telecoms cables for a fixed line. You can go straight to having mobile phone technology, for example, in countries in Africa, and people were talking about this leapfrogging idea, And then a very clever researcher called Mike Hobday came along and said, it's not leapfrog, it's hard slog, which means it's a long, hard work. And that is what if you look at South Korea and the biggest developing countries of East Asia, they have gone up from the bottom, right? They have worked through, manufacturing sewing machines and learning how to do that from all the foreign companies that have come in, and investing in education, and so it's a long, hard slog in order to really catch up and get to the frontier of innovation, and so that was his argument. So I was thinking that, in the context of creative industries, us as, in terms of developing the field also, right? I mean, are there some things that we can miss out, and perhaps we can jump to better classifications? Yeah. Maybe there's an opportunity there to think about new things, and there are, and maybe but sometimes perhaps we do have to do the hard slog as well, right? We have to go around to all the creative groups, and we have to take down people's contact addresses, we have to collect data, and that does serve as advocacy. So for a long time I've been doing studies of creative clusters in the UK. We started this in the south, in Brighton, and we did a project there that has been replicated in other places in the UK. And it was about creative and digital, and how that is combining together. We called it fusion. right? And we found that companies that are fused in creativity and digital tended to grow more, right? And that was fitted government agendas and became a popular idea. And the opportunity came up to replicate this in South Africa, in Cape Town, with partners there. We did a study there, and that was a hard slog as well, because it proved difficult to find the gatekeepers to communities able to collect data, and it was hard to do, but eventually we did, and we produced a study with a colleague, Jen Snowball, who led it, and we have a paper in Journal of Cultural Economics on that. But what was interesting about that is that the questions that they came up to add to what we had added in the UK, we hadn't really thought about, right? So in the South African context, they were very interested in the census categories of race, for example, which we hadn't really thought about in terms of the UK clusters. And so we came up with all this new data about diversity, right? And proving that, you know, the companies that, it's not only the disciplines in terms of arts and technology and programming and animation having a diversity of skills, it's also about a social diversity and an ethnic diversity as well. The most fused companies are the ones that are the most diverse socially and ethnically. So what I'm saying is, all of which is to say, there are new questions that we can add in these new contexts, and we can build on and jump ahead in a lot of while we're using some of the methods and some of the structures that have proved useful elsewhere.
Thank you. Please.
Can I have, this is going to be perhaps provocative, but I'd be interested in understanding what the panel and you and everyone here thinks. I haven't written on this, so this is more of an intuition, right? A hypothesis. I think that there's a tension between the certain evolutionary undertones of creative industry discourse, which states that we have AI. AI is now the top. Then there's creative industries. Then there's like the arts, and then the lowest one, which is interesting. It's important, but it's not. It doesn't really add a lot in terms of economic value, which would be heritage, right? There's this kind of evolutionary or understanding of where the creative industries should go right now in policy debates, and then because AI is the future. So we should all support the future. And if we don't support the future, then our policies are incorrect and short-sighted, and we're not supporting the public good somehow. That's what I hear. And then, on the other hand, this aim to have equal, fair, global north, global south relations. There's a sense, I hear a lot that actors in the global north, UK, wants to cooperate with actors in the global south. And what are we going to do? We're going to bring our knowledge in AI. And then we're going to, of course, exchange on AI. Are you going to exchange on indigenous practices? Are you going to exchange and learn? Do we really want to learn in the global north about the worldviews of indigenous groups? And the way how they think, and this kind of 7-generational approach where you're always thinking about whatever you do is going to have an impact in several future generations. Because if we do that, then AI, as Kate just mentioned, becomes a big problem. So it just seems to me like there are tremendous, profound contradictions and inconsistencies in creative industries, practice and scholarship and narratives. And I think it does a disservice. We do a disservice to ourselves and to the field by not acknowledging them. And I think we should. And I don't have answers either. But we're just pretending that all of this is compatible. And I don't think it is.
Yeah. Anybody wants comments?
Yeah, I mean,
this is really,
I'm always struck actually by, it's precisely never things like community-based project building, participatory democracy, etc., that we kind of draw lessons into policy. It's almost always some variation of how should you support yourself in the context of there being little or no welfare state, and how should you be more entrepreneurial. So picking up on, it was a really good cross-European project that's kind of now up at Glasgow with one of your colleagues, Robin Steedman that looked at kind of film production in the Ghanaian context, and she's applied it elsewhere. And her work is like really critical of the idea of sort of hustling as a mechanism to be successful in the kind of highly gender unequal film industry there. But I keep seeing kind of cropping up in various bits of policy and academic management speak the idea of institutions being better at hustling. And it's a bit like, really, that's the lesson you took here? Like this kind of catastrophic failure for an exporting industry and gender relations, and the line that got picked up, you know, as the kind of the lesson here is maybe the worst thing that could come out of it. So yeah, I think you're right, really. There is this kind of, you know, all of the wrong possible lessons get learned.
Yeah, I think the global north, global south argument can be replicated in a sense even outside of that geographic thing. I think the whole field is freighted with a kind of ideological, you know, lie, I think is probably the word I'm looking for, in a sense that it can produce benign, socially equitable growth, which is still economic growth, still tied into the systems under which we live, and we'll have all these kind of beneficial things, but there'll be no problem. It's always had that kind of idea. I mean, I think that's why, maybe why we feel uncomfortable with the idea of creativity, Jonathan, because it's such a benign term. If you say things are getting more creative, this is a very creative person, we're all having some creative ideas, it sounds unproblematic, it sounds good, but it's hugely problematic. The way it is ideologically constructed in this discourse is hugely problematic because it covers up, it serves to cover up a lot of these kind of problems. And I think that's, I mean, all academic disciplines are ideologically freighted. Of course they are. You know, philosophy is ideologically freighted, history is, and all those kind of things. But this is a kind of creation of a sort of hybrid of policy and academic disciplines, which I think is particularly ideologically freighted and particularly, in that sense, rather contradictory.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. Dave, you want to chip in, please?
I mean, but it's very productive at the same time.
It can be productive.
It opens up lots of kind of possibilities,
that's true.
Both at the end of kind of impact, because policy is automatically speaking the same language as the researchers, but also I think intellectually as well, because it creates this question of how do you solve this puzzle? How do you know, kind of move on beyond just creativity? Is great.
Although I'm not sure the policy itself has got any more productive or more interesting in the last 20 odd years. It seems mostly to be the same old stuff.
The bits I've been doing for 3 years obviously have. Come on.
And this is everything, like, sorry, I'm sad I'm not a speaker, I'm just a chair here, but this is so interesting, because this is about tensions of the economic progress, the economic revolutions, the economic clashes. And sometimes I feel that usually creative and cultural industries are either seen as good slogans for governments, like, well, we grow 7%, we're going to invest in creative and cultural industries and so on, or is like even how you shape the understanding of the field from multilateral organisms, like the Creative Economy Report have this concentric cycles model in which you have the central industries and the peripheral industries, but the peripheral is where the money lies. And how like governments are doing policies for the centric ministries of culture, whereas the money is in the periphery. Anyway, I have prepared some questions for you guys, but I just replaced it for different questions now. But before that, I think that's going to be nice to, I think that I'm going to save my questions and open up space for the audience, unless the audience isn't warmed up so far. I will bring my questions. So is that okay? Let's do this. So, I would love to have questions, comments. Again, it can be either in Portuguese or in English. Podem ser em português ou em inglês as questões.
Please hold your hand up if you have a question now.
Carol tem comentário ou uma questão?
Eu queria...
Carol, se você puder rapidamente se apresentar, eu vou pedir para todos falarem o nome e de onde vem. Em português, por favor.
Eu sou a Carol D'Artora, sou do Brasil, sou do estado do Paraná, no sul do Brasil, sou professora de História e deputada federal. E estou atuando agora como presidente da Comissão de Cultura na Câmara de Deputados. E a minha pergunta, eu esqueci o seu nome.
Mafalda.
Mafalda. Minha pergunta é para Mafalda. Eu gostaria que ela desenvolvesse melhor o porquê ela não gosta do termo indústria criativa. Eu tenho uma percepção, eu gosto mais também de economia criativa, mas gostaria de ouvir um pouquinho mais sobre isso.
Carol, posso quebrar o protocolo e só perguntar, Carol, você pode rapidamente dizer qual a função da Comissão de Cultura da Câmara dos Deputados Federais no Brasil? Acho que é importante para as pessoas que estão aqui entenderem que é uma posição muito relevante no Parlamento brasileiro.
Na Comissão de Cultura, a gente discute e aprova ou não todas as políticas públicas com relação à cultura e, especificamente, esse ano a gente tem o desafio de reformular um Plano Nacional de Cultura. Então, esse é o objetivo. São parlamentares que discutem quais são as políticas para a cultura que são importantes ou não ali na comissão e a gente aprova essas políticas ou não.
Obrigado. Ótimo.
Vou tentar responder em português, mas vou tentar. I'll try. Na minha experiência, ao nível da União Europeia, quando nós falamos sobre indústria, há uma tendência para pensar na ideia de produtividade e que leva à rejeição de espaços artísticos e criativos experimentais e que vê neste tipo de prática um custo, uma despesa, que não tem ou que não apoia o interesse público, sabe? Portanto, há um certo fechamento, diz em português do Brasil, fechamento da percepção sobre o que é o valor da cultura e da criatividade. Para mim, o valor da criatividade não é algo que se pode traduzir num ficheiro Excel, penso que para nenhum de nós, mas quando falamos de indústrias criativas, tudo o que é uma prática que tem valor a longo prazo ou que tem valor em si mesma, uma prática artística, um filme experimental que seja visto por 100 pessoas, para mim tem valor, porque existe enquanto objeto artístico tal, não é? Mas quando começamos a falar de indústria criativa, no espaço europeu, talvez seja diferente no Brasil, tudo o que é experimentação, tudo o que é tudo o que vai para além do valor económico e de scale-up, as coisas que podem apanhar uma grande escala e serem vistas por milhões de pessoas, tudo isso passa a ser visto como acessório no discurso. E para mim é esse o grande problema. Eu estou na cultura e na arte porque acredito na arte e na cultura como espaço de liberdade. Para mim isso é central, é um pilar da democracia. E esse espaço de liberdade requer perceber que o valor desse espaço existe em si mesmo. E a ideia da indústria criativa limita muito o discurso e o debate e faz com que isto seja impossível. Este tipo de conversa passa a ser uma conversa de maluquinhos, sabe? Eu não quero estar a lutar contra... eu penso que usar esse tipo de linguagem nos limita e faz com que seja muito depois difícil estar a dizer não, há outras formas e essas formas são vistas como exceção e não como o centro da prática cultural.
Obrigado. Dave.
So yeah, apologies, I don't speak any variety of Portuguese, actually, but one of the things you said made me think, actually, that the example of the kind of productiveness of this tension. So the UK government has this thing called the Culture and Heritage Capital Programme, which is jointly between the UK government and academic research funders. There are either 7 or 9 research projects at the moment, and it's grappling actually with this question about how do you value the parts of particularly the kind of heritage and artistic activities that maybe don't get captured by traditional like ticket prices or market values. I think it's precisely because of, I guess, the awareness of the limits of creative industries to capture the things in the middle, you know, of the circle or at the bottom of the ladder. That policy is not just tried to do this for policy reasons, but has also thought about this as kind of the development of the field. So, you know, using cultural economics, heritage economics, bringing in kind of participatory forms of decision making. So even where we have these, I think rightly kind of critical moments, I think it's important not to kind of leave out the way that policy itself has been active in interrogating these issues.
Thank you so much. We have one question in the audience. If you can please just say your name and where you come from.
Yeah, I'm from Manchester, Johnny J. I guess you call it grassroots, which I'm music. My main background's music. I think more of an observation, but definitely a question, is the idea of who, when you're researching and then you're feeding back into policy, who are you asking, like, the questions to, and what are the questions you're asking? Because, sorry, the lady on the end, some of what you're saying really resonated with me, even though it's from France. And then the gentleman from Newcastle, when you said that you did something in Brighton and you had to go to Brazil to learn about diversity. You know, that's a bit strange for me coming from my background, which I guess you call electro, house music, Manchester music. And I think in say, I can speak about my community, and there's a lot of knowledge about what worked, what didn't work in both the cultural, creative, and arts industries, embedded in certain communities. You know, certainly the Black and South Asian community, but probably find the same in the LGBT community and various others. So, and I think there could be a lot of learning if those people were asked certain questions so they can feed back, so that you can feed back to the policymakers. And I think there is a class issue here as well, because just going and asking a South Asian person or a Black person who wants to be middle class, then they're going to give you a very biased answer. Sorry, I'm one-dimensional. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Thank you very much, John. Now I remember we were together in a Create Tech activity at Manchester. I love your voice, mate.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point, I think. The question about who we ask and when, funding partly dictates these kind of things. So we're often working on funded projects, and there are kind of policy fashions and things like that. This is not a defense, but I'm just saying this is how it operates. There are kind of policy fashions for doing certain things. So there will be suddenly money to go to Brazil to study something which you could equally study in Manchester, but there isn't money to do it in Manchester. So some of these things are, as I say, not a defense of the system, but that's sometimes how it operates. I think that there has been quite a lot of research on kind of clusters or milieu, or kind of what you're talking about, the growth of scenes, the development of scenes. But often that comes from a kind of critical tradition, and sometimes doesn't maybe look quite enough at what makes certain things work really well. We're often looking at the kind of, so loads and loads of work that's been done on sort of British cities and scenes in Britain basically makes the argument that we used to be better at doing this stuff than we are now. We've basically had, and in some ways that's true, we have disassembled some of the elements that made those kind of things work, from free higher education to cheap housing to the dole, etc., etc. We have disassembled some of those things, but nonetheless, things still work in these kind of scenes, and I think we're less good at picking up on what the ways in which things work, despite almost the kind of disassembling of the welfare state, than we have been about being sort of critical about the disassembling of the welfare state, if that makes sense.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Brighton study, yes. So Brighton is well known for being diverse, particularly from an LGBT point of view. It's not especially diverse ethnically, actually. At the time, in building that sample, we had spoken about, do we want to ask people from the gay community, to contribute in terms of this rather narrow agenda that we had at the time, which was that there's something going on with creative digital and productivity and growth, right? And can you guys find some evidence? That was basically the mission that we had. And I think at that stage that it came back that from an ethics point of view that you can't be asking people questions like that, and let's just stick to hitting our deadlines in terms of the survey from that point of view. But the point I was trying to make was that it was worthwhile, and having done that study, it wasn't the Brazil study, it was the one in Cape Town in South Africa, where we added in those, the racial classifications from the census there, and that has developed the methodology, right? And so it's been and this is a journey from 2013 through to now, right? That my point was that we can develop these methodologies as we go, and it's important that we do so, and that you can pick up new questions as from different places where you try these things out, really, and that's a positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's always annoying when you make a point and then the panel's like, oh yeah, we furiously agree with you. Yeah, you're totally right. And I'm basically going to do the same, but maybe give some kind of notes of caution. So I've been involved with colleagues in doing a lot of stuff on social class, talking about the way that creative industries have catastrophic social class problems as a whole, cluster of creative industries. I can see Katie Shaw at the back of the room, who's been working on this in publishing, writing, raising these kinds of problems in that particular field. So there is a bunch of us doing it. But some of this work was enabled by basically changes to how Office for National Statistics collected data, which were both controversial, and when you explain how the data is collected, people really hate it because it involves asking people what their parents did for a living when they were growing up. And when you kind of say like that's what class means, people like lose their minds about it. They really don't like it. So I think basically we also need to see both the collection of data and who you're asking as dynamic questions that work for maybe kind of 3 to 5 years at a time, and then they need kind of rethinking, refounding. So it's not just the question of you create a framework that you think works to collect data from people you need to be dealing with, but also how do you introduce a kind of dynamism to that, so you're changing up and kind of reacting and being responsive. Certainly like over a 5-year period, but probably more like 1, 2, or 3 years as well.
And can I just also add, it's going to echo what Kate just said, but just to give you an example. So I work on a project basis. So I need to apply and get grants with colleagues. And then we get this grant, hopefully, and then we develop the work. And we apply for EU funding, European Union funding, right? And for example, I don't use the term decolonization in those grants. I don't, because I don't know who's going to evaluate that. And unfortunately, as you know, these discussions around equity, global justice, have been so politicized, and it can really hurt those who are putting together a grant application. And so what I do and my colleagues do is that we use this language that the EU wants us to use, and then we say we're going to expand it, we're going to find blind spots, we're going to look at the geopolitics of it. And then when we do research, instead of only interviewing Europeans, we also interview people who are actually working in South Africa, etc. And then we interview those who work with platforms and Netflix, but also the independent ones, and those who are really struggling, and those who know the context and the ecology. And then I ask them, where are the blind spots? What are we not doing? What should we do? But this is work that we have to do. It should be at the core of what we do, but we have to do it like despite everything else. So we have to tick all these boxes to then create space to this kind of work, because culture has been, and cultural policy has been politicized and weaponized, and we just waste a lot of time, I think, managing these issues and managing the politics of it, I think, to be able to do the kind of work that most of us would like to do. I mean, I'm generalizing, but so that's also why. Again, I also think that we can do better, and I think most of us are trying, I'd say. And so, but we're also doing that in a system that does not want us to do this work, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Mafalda. Thank you, everybody. Guys, just to organize a little bit now, because we have a few minutes left in the session, how many questions I will have from the audience? Please, can you please raise the hand? Who is going to make questions? We have 2, that's right. So can you make your question in 1 minute max, and then as a goal. And then we will have like a final round of comments. And then we are going to finish the session, and we will have a projection of a short film. Andrea is here, produced by CoStar. It's going to last like around 11 minutes. And then finally, we will have lunch. Hope's better than yesterday. And it's very good, Natalie, thanks. Sorry. We made the decision about the lunch, so you should complain with me. And we're gonna have the lunch and keep going with the other sessions. Just a comment for the online audience. We have almost 100 screens watching the event online. I say screens because I don't know how many people per screen. And yeah, that's the plan. So 2 questions, we finish the session, Andrea take over with the film, and we go to how much time lunch? Yeah. Yeah, and go for the lunch. All right, questions, please checking and.
Okay, Harold, can you hear me? Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Tian Guo, a second-year PhD candidate. Maybe I'm the one and only one to use 3rd languages in this room today. So I will use my English to translate more clear. So the first thing we mentioned about the AI is the future. But for my stand, I think AI is now. It's not the future actually. So because I want to say that maybe in the past, so the companies, so they can get profit, they will never to cut jobs. They will recruit more according to the economy, actually. But at present, even some companies, they can get profit. They will decide to cut jobs because AI. It can increase efficiency and reduce costs at the same time. Yes, this is the most different things between each industrial revolutions, actually. So why AI is really important because it changed so many things. So because I'm also do some influencer things. So I read news last night. It's about the Disney to cut their virtual departments for the Marshall Studio, for some of the superheroes department, because AI. So many things changed. It happened in the reality now. So the future is not. The AI is not the future. So the AI is now. So what? Actually, I don't have a question. Actually,
It's a good point. I love it.
I just want to make a reply for this because what I do this PhD actually. So we mentioned about the everyone want to involve or work in the CCI industries actually because I'm working for the entertainment industry 14 years. Yes, I mentioned it so many times actually. But what I always mention this, and I think the truth is, the first time I was working for the radio station as a radio host. So it's not the digitalization time. So we use a test to communicate with each audience. But then so many things changed. And as the member of the LGBTQ member, so I love the American cultures. So I really love the TV shows like Sex and the City, and we all agree these TV shows. So, and I have a chance to work in the Universal Music Group. And then it gave me a chance to work in New York. So I was thinking that maybe CCI industry, so many like gay people like us getting together. So maybe the problems is just in my community. But actually, yes, but I truly don't find some things that the people working in industries, like we mentioned, the creative labors, we mentioned we encountered with so many problems. So we have a talk yesterday, but they are mainly come from the perspective of academia, from perspective of the research. But I think to some degree it's too waste because our research is happening in the reality. If we couldn't to combine the theory and the practice, the people working in the industry together, actually, I think it's just we are doing the literature review to some degree. Yeah. So it's not the history, it's the story truly that happened in everyone's life. Therefore, I was thinking that maybe we should to do some things because I still think I'm from the industry, not a researcher. Yeah. Yeah. Even Leandro is my supervisor, helping me a lot. But I want to say that I can provide insights from industry. And I sincerely hope that so I can find some researchers and give me some your insights from academia to put my industries and their research together. And I think it is a useful and a meaningful part for this research. So it's not like a question, it's just I want to reply the questions you mentioned. And this is the thing I want to share.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much.
Can I respond though?
Can we have just the final question and then or comment and then we can sum up?
All right, so I make it simple. Hi, I'm Cheryl Choi. I'm from Hong Kong originally, now based in Manchester. So I quite agree what he said, like the academics are very much focused on the policy making, more focused on the local. It's good. But now globalized, meaning everybody have a power to make their creation, to spread in the global. But the fact is the power of the bargain power to let the creators to actually make their work into a business, form into a business, and then licensing, whatever that is. We don't have the money. Grassroots are always poor. And think about funds and investors. No, impossible. We are poor and we don't have that network around. And to spin up to that top is just that % of person. So I like AI, but the fact is we need the creative digital infrastructure to support the creators on building them into a business model they can work before you move into the AI and deal with the digital AI like NFT or whatever that is. You have to protect their intellectual property, and that is essential. That's what I want to say.
Brilliant, and I think that your questions will also reverberate well in the following session. So bring it again. But of course, let's discuss now.
So I think in the creative policy world, there are so many people who are writing about AI. So I think you can find a lot of people who support that kind of transition and that kind of work. And I also think that there should be space for different voices. And I don't ever want to be in the cultural sector feeling forced to support something or a kind of practice. So that's the first thing. The other thing that I want to say is that my background is in contemporary art. Most contemporary art that engages with AI, I think, is extremely boring and interesting and derivative. And it's just using AI as a gimmick. So I think that also has to be said. And there are many artists who are using AI because where the funding is, but you talk to them and they don't want to be doing that. So we are nudging a field that is a field of experimentation and freedom as a pillar of democracies. And we are nudging people to do a certain kind of work because we do think that that is the present or the future. I think this is in complete contradiction with the values of the cultural sector. And I think that this is a waste of public money. And I don't think it's an effective use of public money. And I think this has to be said, and no one is saying that, right? So yeah, I try to use my limited privilege in academia to say those things. I also think it's important to say that there are different models of what the cultural sector is for. And this is the conversation that we don't have very often. We have, when we talk about AI, the assumption is, as you said, and policymakers agree with this, and politicians, they'll say we have to make the most effective use, the most productive use of funding to achieve cultural artifacts or films that will achieve the highest number of tickets or audience numbers. And this is how success is measured. This is a model that translates in the United States, for example, towards a film industry that creates blockbusters. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love a blockbuster. I love The Devil Wears Prada. I can quote it to you. I'm not anti-American. I'm not anti this kind of cultural production. I am anti the idea that this is the model and that there are no other models and no other ways of assessing the value of culture. And so that's what I'm trying to do at the U. And in the U, we talk about, again, we could talk, there's this agreement, there are different countries with different perspectives, but the idea is that the economy serves social values. It's a social economy. That is what the EU is, in theory, not always. And the social values are namely cultural diversity. And cultural diversity has priority above growth. This is the model. This is what's on the treaties. And so that means that supporting cultural diversity of actors, cultural diversity in terms of different kinds of films, cultural diversity in terms of, yes, having blockbusters, medium-sized films, small films, documentaries, films that are not seen by loads of people. This is a priority that is seen as associated with the public good. The public good, a good life, and a good society are defined in association with cultural diversity. And AI can be used as a tool to support that cultural diversity. Right now, it's not being used in that way, as we know. It's leading to concentration, it's leading to the destruction of jobs. There's figures that show that the film industries in the US have lost like 20 or 30% of employees. And some people will say, well, that's the market speaking. The market is the most important thing. Not in the model with which I work, where the market serves other values. So I just want to kind of highlight that the discussion on AI is not just about AI. It's a discussion on what culture is for and what cultural policy is for, and on the public good. And I think that it's good there are different understandings of public good, don't get me wrong. But yeah, this panel is actually an exception. In most cases, you go, yeah, I think a good exception. I go to panels on creative industries, and AI is being seen as the focus. And so, yeah, I think you can find space where you can have those conversations, but I'm really thankful that we can also have other conversations. So, sorry for the long answer.
No, thank you, Mafalda. Anybody else, please, want to make
Okay, in the interest
remarks?
of time, I will say nothing about AI. Just one quick thought on the role of academics, I think, because there was a sense in the room that, academics spend all their time doing airy-fairy theoretical things, and they should be somehow more grounded. Academics have a particular role in society. We're not journalists, we're not influencers, we're not PR people. We have a particular tradition and role, which I think actually does need to be defended occasionally, because we are part of a different kind of intellectual process and an international kind of project than all those other kind of groups, and therefore I just wanted to speak up very briefly for the role of academics.
Thank you, Casey.
I would say, so on AI, I mean, last year I did a rapid review for BCMS on the effects of productivity of AI in the creative industries, and there's a real lack of empirical evidence that is comprehensive in empirical work that is happening now, right? We know that still the take-up is not very high. People are using it in their personal lives more than they are in their professional lives, even in the creative industries, right? What studies there are, and they all cite each other, there's very few of them, but they show that in areas like professional writing, for example, copywriting, PR, that type of thing, yes, you can do tasks quicker and cheaper by using AI, and people that are introduced to it, they tend to go back to it and they use it more. There are disputes about quality and creativity and the originality of that content that comes through, right? And this is a concern. The big concern really for creatives is, does the boss care about the quality and about the originality? Does the client care enough to contract a creative worker who can do a better job than just doing a prompt and getting something acceptable in a couple of hours themselves, right? So that is an issue, but we don't know what the effects will be, right? We know that it's going to be easier to generate a whole lot of more content. We don't know what effects that is going to have. Normally, when you have, the price of something goes down, then demand goes up, right? So that could mean that all the other sectors, they suddenly start using marketing and advertising services from creative industries, and everybody wins, right? Because they sell more products, and we get more growth, and everybody's happy. That's one scenario, right? On the other hand, we could lose that middle layer of creatives, and this is already starting, particularly in programming and coding and around around the edges of the freelance economy around creative industries. But I think the development is quite uneven so far. We can see with a lot of these technologies, you've got to really check on the hype, right? So people talk about, Veo 3 came out last week and it's amazing. If you actually look it up on the reviews, you can't actually upload content to it. It has some advances in terms of like synchronization between sound and video. This is so you can prompt and generate video. But so far, I mean, that gives you very little creative control, right? If you can't upload your own content, you get what is given to you by the LLM. That's not what you want, is it? So I think there's if you actually look into a lot of these new technologies that are lauded as being, this changes everything, actually it doesn't. And they're all dependent in the end on human creativity, which we must always remember.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly and maybe trying to sort of synthesize some of the things we've been talking about. These debates point us towards a bigger question of what is the social model that we have for our societies. Various sort of studies of the history of technology suggest that, jobs don't disappear, new jobs are created, but who does those new jobs? How is that, kind of set of opportunities distributed? And what kind of social model do we have for transitions in different kinds of occupations, and indeed the kind of social status and remuneration that those occupations are given? In the UK, the social model is completely broken, and essentially the settlement is, it's your problem if you can't retrain and you lose your job and it gets taken by a computer, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously this is very common in the US as well. The question might be how to learn from other places that have different social models that we can kind of incorporate. And indeed, part of the job that academics have is to think about how we do this learning and how, we can kind of bring together these different perspectives, partially because policy is too busy dealing with, the future that is now. But also when we get into kind of questions of things like, what is the history of technology? That's not really where kind of policy is, even at the best of times.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. It was great. I'm sorry if I brought a lot of informality. But anyway, muito obrigado a todos. Eu vou falar em português esse final. Então, encerramos essa mesa agora. Teremos mais duas sessões à tarde.